So Chef AJ is a sort of a national figure. She's a plant-based chef. She has a weekly, well, it was daily, now it's I think weekly, very popular Facebook Live show. And I go on there once a month if any of you are interested. She has different doctors on, and so I take any questions because I'm a primary care doctor. And so primary care doctors in general, we are equipped, especially if you've been practicing a while, to answer any questions from, fetuses to 110-year-old people. So I guess at the end, I think I'm going to talk a little bit about cholesterol first, but at the end, you ask me anything. Toenail fungus, heartburn, cholesterol, anything you want, and appeal, because I'm also a farmer. I exist here because of your tax dollars. I went to Rutgers University, and then I went to Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School in Newark. And then after that, I went to George Washington University, did internal medicine. As soon as I finished my training, my dad, after putting me through all this school, was diagnosed with end-stage metastatic pancreatic cancer. Out of the blue. He had 2 weeks of abdominal pain. We took him to Sloan Kettering. They said, you're done. No treatment could do anything. So we took him home, and I moved home to take care of him. And out of my desperation, I went to the Fairlawn Public Library to look, at that time, alternative medicine. That word had just come out. And there was this guy named Andrew Weil, and that big guy with the bald head and the bushy beard. And I went to look for some things in the library about him, and his books were not really of any help, but I came across some other books, and one of them was a book about testimonies of people who had survived dreadful cancers by eating food, by eating plant-based diet. And there was a gentleman in there who cured himself of the same cancer my father had, eating a plant-based diet. And not only did he do that, this was in the 80s he did this, he just died 3 years ago. And he went on to found the University of South Carolina School of Public Health. So grateful was he that his life was saved. So in any event, my father was attracted to this. He had no other choice. So he said, I'll do it. And he did. He lived not 30 or 60 days, he lived for 1.5 years. But that 1.5 years was amazing. During that time, in 6 months, he reduced his tumor masses by 50%. There's no treatment for pancreatic cancer even today, and this was in the 90s, that reduces pancreatic cancer at all. So that was quite amazing, because the cancer was so late, it eventually overtook him. But I learned a lot from my father, and that set me on a different course. There are other details of this story, but needless to say, as I traveled on my journey, I found out that it's not only good for cancer, it's good for everything. That eating this way is basically, I hate as a physician to say cure-all, but as close to something can become as a cure-all, this is. And more powerful than any drug that I know of that's been invented. And this is especially true for high cholesterol. What is cholesterol? Cholesterol is a lipid. It's a specific kind of, it's a fat. There are many different kinds of fat that we have in us and that exist in nature, but cholesterol is a specific kind of fat. Our livers manufacture it. And why do we have it in us? Does anyone know? Why is cholesterol necessary? If we didn't have cholesterol, we'd be dead. But we only need a small amount. We don't need a lot. Yes, ma'am.
Doesn't it surrounds the brain, and it also patches, scratches in the arteries?
Well, the brain thing, you are correct. The brain, 1/3 of it is made out of a different kind of fat called omega-3s, essential omega-3 fatty acids. People, you've probably seen this, you know, fish oils, and people eat fish and do all kinds of other things, flaxseed and other kinds of things to get this. There's cholesterol in all animal tissues, but that's probably the most important one for the brain. But specifically for cholesterol, you need it to make sex hormones. If you don't have cholesterol, you will not have estrogen, you will not have testosterone, you will not have other hormones. So what else do we need it for? Cholesterol is the essential component to build our cell membranes. We are composed of microscopic billions of cells that make up, and different kinds of cells that make up our tissues, lung cells, skin cells, heart cells, muscle cells. But every single one of these cells has a boundary around it. It's like a little wall, and it's called a membrane. And an essential component of those membranes is cholesterol. And your cells, you know, they get damaged as you go on living every day. You need some more cells. They'll divide, they grow. Your body needs cholesterol to build. They're like bricks in this wall. They need the cholesterol to build the cells. So those are the two main purposes of cholesterol in our body. Our liver is very smart, as is our body. It knows exactly how much cholesterol to make to meet the demands of the sex hormones we need and to build our membranes to surround our cells. The problem we have in this country is that there is too much cholesterol in the vast majority of our bodies, patients, people that we have. And I would say, let me quantify this for you. I would say in an average primary care practice, once a person reaches over middle age, there are very few people who have a normal cholesterol. Does anyone know what the normal total cholesterol value is set by the government?
150?
You're too strict. I wonder why. Under 200. It should be under 150. Before we had farming, before we were growing food, when we were just hunters and gatherers, wandering the earth, pulling up roots from the ground and eating leaves and stuff like that. Do you know what it's thought that our ancient ancestors' cholesterol was? I'm not talking about when we were great apes. I'm talking about 10,000 years ago. We were what we are now. 125. People eating a very high quality plant-based diet, the average person is 150. You got it on the nose. But the federal government says, and if we were to eat exactly optimally, it could be 125. The federal government says it should be under 200, which is normal. So I'm not saying optimal. I'm just saying according to the federal government standards. And when I would say 90% of all the people walking in the office, not because they have cholesterol problems, because they have an ankle sprain, they're walking in for anything, I'd say 90% can't meet that. The federal government's easy standard. So that's for the total cholesterol. You need more information than that. The total cholesterol is made of what I call the good, the bad, and the ugly. Did anyone ever see that movie?
Yeah.
It's a good one. So I think about it like that. There's the good cholesterol, and these are three components. The good cholesterol is called the HDL, the high density lipoprotein. And by the way, your liver makes these different kinds of cholesterol. The good cholesterol cleans out plaque or clogs in your arteries. It saves you. And that one, for men, the normal average is like in the 40s. The average woman has it in the 50s. I see people who have it in the 30s. I've seen some even in the 20s. They have problems. Then I see sometimes people who have it in the 80s. They're superstars. And that's usually genetic. You got a good gene from your parents that gives your liver the ability to save you. But that's not what most people concentrate on. And by the way, if you had a low cholesterol, a good one, which you want a higher one, right? Because it cleans out your arteries. If you had one that was too low, Do you know how to get it up higher? There's something you could do.
Exercise.
Yes, excellent. Aerobic exercise, high intensity like running, Nordic track, Stairmaster, doing this every day. And if you did it consistently, you could get it, I've noticed in my patients, to rise an average of 10 points, which is pretty good. Okay, but there's no food that can do that. And guess what? There's no drugs either. We used to think that taking niacin, I don't know if anyone has ever done that, it's a vitamin. Niacin could get that up, and it does kind of, but we have found out it doesn't help you when a drug does it. When a drug changes a number, it doesn't really help that much. That's why when I was a young doctor, when I went to medical school, they had me prescribing it. No one does it anymore because it doesn't help you. So that's the good. The bad. The bad cholesterol, that's what everyone concentrates on. And that is called LDL. And the way I remember that is L stands for lousy. LDL, that's the bad cholesterol. And that's why almost every doctor and his brother and sister ends up writing people who reach middle age and definitely in their 60s and 70s. It's like a Pez dispenser. You automatically get statin drugs. Lipitor, generic name is atorvastatin. Crestor, generic name is rosuvastatin. Zocor, generic name is simvastatin. Do these sound familiar to you? Who knows a person who's taking these drugs in their family or friends? Almost everyone. Why is that? Well, does anyone know why? Why has it become so popular? Like why? I would say it's the most popular drug prescribed. It definitely more than stomach medicines, Prilosec, Zantac, antacids. It's number one. Does anyone know why? Why a doctor has gone so crazy prescribing these things?
They have a patient for life. The pharmaceuticals have a customer for life.
Yeah, well, they're the nefarious things underneath.
They don't pursue the healthy aspect of eating.
Yes, these are all true. What I'm asking you is, why, when you go into a doctor's office and you're 50 or 60 years old, and don't have a crazy, it's not crazy, but you have a moderately high cholesterol, why is the doctor has been taught, not because they want to make money or they want a patient for life, that may be true, but the medical science, the American College of Cardiology, they've said you should give this person that prescription. So what I'm asking you is, what's the medical reasoning behind that?
To prevent a heart attack?
Strokes.
Yes, to prevent heart attacks. So how do we know that that prevents heart attacks? How do we know that? There's a lot of data. There's years and years and years of data. I would say of all the drugs that doctors prescribe, and there are tens of thousands of them, from chemotherapy to breast cancer drugs to hormone replacement therapy to acne medicines to antibiotics, the evidence that we have is strongest for this one set of drugs, that it benefits human beings. I'm not talking about because they want to make money on you, because they want you to come back. There is real evidence, oodles of it, mountains of it, mountains. There's so much evidence that I cannot refute it. I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that these drugs don't work. You got me. It is estimated that for the average American, and it's very complicated, the data, but they definitely prolong your life. Who is the average American? Are you the average American? What happens if you're not the average American? Well, when I say the average American, I mean someone eating an average diet. This is called the standard American diet. Yes, if you are eating the standard American diet, these drugs definitely, and if you have a high cholesterol, I guess I would take them, because your life will be lengthened and your chance of getting a heart attack, because remember what we said, LDL clogs up your arteries, and these statin drugs that I mentioned, they lower LDL significantly. And the level, remember we talked about, well, I didn't talk about these numbers yet. The categories for LDL are, the government wants it below 100 LDL. Remember, total cholesterol below 200, LDL below 100 is normal. After many, many years, we've discovered that if you drive it below 70, basically you're home free, you won't have a heart attack. That's what doctors try to do. They're going to give you these drugs. We know that it's that line, below 70. And once you get below 70, they're fine. Now these doctors are getting more aggressive. There's some data from Europe that shows that if you've had heart attacks and we already know you have severe arterial clogs, maybe if you get it below 50, maybe if we give you more statinate and more drugs, it would really help to prevent heart attacks and strokes even more. Here's what we're beginning to also find out. Guess what? There's a relationship between getting Alzheimer's and clogged up arteries, which is due to high cholesterol. And we have an Alzheimer's epidemic. And the line of Alzheimer's keeps going up. This is the reason why these are so popular. But the question is there an alternative? Are there any downsides to taking these drugs? I mean, if there are no downsides, it's like, why not? Well, the problem is there are downsides. Does anyone know what they are to taking these drugs?
One's muscles weakness. Muscle weakness.
Well, side effects.
Okay.
That's number one on the hit parade, what you said. It's not uncommon that people will start on a statin agent and it causes muscle inflammation. And if it gets bad enough, you can actually see, it's usually muscle aches. You can actually see it's so much inflammation that the muscle enzymes are spilling into the blood. And that's kind of worrisome. It's like a drug is inflaming your muscle. Inflammation is the basis of chronic diseases. Nah, that's a little spooky. And usually people who have that, it's across the board with the rest of the drugs. It's just like, yeah, that's there. There are other side effects too. One that is known to be is that if you take these drugs, you have an increased risk of getting diabetes. Taking statin drugs increases your chance of getting diabetes. And it's thought that once even if you take them for a while, and even if you stop them, it will not decrease your chance of getting diabetes. Here's another thing. It's thought that they're accumulating evidence, but we know that in a certain segment of elderly patients who take this, senior citizens, they get memory problems. Now, I talked to you before that there's an evolving relationship we're understanding between clogged up arteries, cholesterol that clogs up the arteries, and getting dementia. But also, if you're taking this drug to unclog your arteries, right, lower the LDL and have a lower cholesterol, the drug itself, by itself, it can cause memory problems. And what we've noticed is that in those senior citizens who get poor memory, if you stop the drug, the memory can improve. So that's a little spooky. I prefer not to prescribe these drugs because for 99% of the people who have an abnormal cholesterol, it's due to the food. It's not due to your genes. It's not due to your family. You didn't inherit it. And I'm not saying there's not 1 out of 100 people or 1 out of 200 people who has some crazy high cholesterol gene in their family. Rarely you come across of it. The practice on the farm, which Steph told you about, which is down the road, I've been there for 10 years. Next month will be our 10th year anniversary. I have never seen a person in 10 years who had this was due to their genes, that they couldn't overcome it with diet. I do have people who have some, they don't have such good genes, and there are people who have excellent genes who have low cholesterol, but I've never seen people who have bad enough genes where they couldn't fix their cholesterol and not be off drug. But I do know rare ones exist. How does eating food raise your cholesterol? Like, how does that work? What are we eating and what kinds of foods would cause this? And then you'd have to go to the doctor and they say, you're going to go on this drug to prevent heart attacks, Alzheimer's, and strokes and other things. Fats increase it. And you said saturated fats. So there are two, if I had to pick the 2 things that are most common, and by the way, trans fats, those are particularly evil kinds of fats. The National Academy of Medicine in Washington, like the highest group of doctor scientists, has issued a statement that the only acceptable intake level of trans fats is 0. 0. There is none. If you want to be safe and not have a heart attack, it's 0. You're not allowed to take in any. Well, where did we find a lot of them? Before, they were outlawed, right? Because of the National Academy of Medicine. The manufacturing of them was outlawed. Like, Crisco used to have them. Margarine used to have them, but they outlawed them. So you know what they use now in Crisco? Saturated fats, palm oil, stuff like that. You used to see on the can that it was just filled with trans fat because they found a substitute. Palm oil, coconut oil, those are heavy saturated fat. But trans fats still exist in our food supply in not such small amounts. Does anyone know where they are? They got them out of Crisco, they got them out of margarine. Why do you think margarine's popularity fell so much and butter started to become popular again? Where do we still eat trans fats?
Chocolate.
Meat. Meat has naturally occurring trans fats. Meat does. If you look, they're there. So, and you're supposed to have 0. That's why we shouldn't eat meat. Because it causes heart attacks and disease. So you're right, trans fats. Saturated fats. Saturated fats, they replaced in all those processed stuff, they did replace the trans fats with them, but they're no bargain either. Your liver, when you take in saturated fats, your liver makes bad LDL cholesterol out of them. It's a feedstock for bad LDL cholesterol, and the more saturated fats you take in, and trans fats, they make cholesterol out of too. The more saturated fats you take in, the more bad cholesterol you will make. Here's the other bad thing about saturated fats. I'm going to give you 2 even more worrisome news about saturated fats that you may not have known, but this is even scarier than what I just told you. The first thing is, we now have identified saturated fats as the primary cause of diabetes. We used to think it was sugar. It's not. I'm not saying that it's healthy to eat a bag of white sugar. If you have diabetes and you open your mouth and pour sugar in, you're going to have very high sugars. But the way you get to be a diabetic, the main way is by eating saturated fats. And what happens is, anyone hear about insulin? It's a hormone. Your pancreas makes insulin, and hormones are directors, chemical directors. They tell cells and processes to go this way and that way. And what insulin does is it knocks on every cell, it binds to a keyhole in the doors of the cells and says, open up and let in sugar from the bloodstream, burn it as fuel. That's what it does. But when you eat saturated fats, it clogs up that receptor or keyhole. All of a sudden, it's resisting insulin. Insulin can't message to the cell to open up to let in sugar from your bloodstream. And guess what happens? The sugar starts to rise in your bloodstream, and your sugar levels go up. Your pancreas starts to flip out and say, whoa, that's not good. I have to make even more insulin. And it starts overproducing insulin. And then finally, eventually, there's so much insulin that it knocks on these doors and gets them open, but you become insulin resistant. Your cells are now resistant to the insulin because of all the saturated fat that's clogging up these doors. That's what insulin resistance is, which is the precursor to diabetes. And what eventually ends up happening is if you're eating enough saturated fats, you become so insulin resistant that even that extra insulin, those extra directors will not open up your doors, and then your sugars just keep rising and rising until you have prediabetes, rising until you have diabetes, and it just keeps going up. Saturated fats. So number one, saturated fats, they raise your LDL cholesterol. Number two, saturated fats, we found this out about 10 or 15 years ago. They're the primary cause of diabetes. Number three, we found this out about 4 years ago. Doctors for a long time have wondered why cancers metastasize. Did you ever know someone who died of cancer who just has one tumor but it doesn't go anywhere? Never. Like, people die from cancers because they spread all over the place. And we finally found in most solid tumors so far that we're tested, but we're not done testing yet, that there is a specific receptor on cancer cells that are waiting for saturated fats. If you have cancer and it's growing, and it's called the CD36 fat receptor, if saturated fat comes and binds to it, it tells that cancer cell to start spreading to other locations. And the avoidance of saturated fats is very powerful in preventing cancers from spreading. Stay away from saturated fats. Now, we've been told this since the 1960s or 70s, but people have not been really looking. And then because of industry signal and other, moneyed interest groups, from time to time, you see all of a sudden there's this exuberance of embracing foods that have saturated fats. Where do we find saturated fats? What foods? What food category? Foods that come from animals. All of them. Animal flesh, animal foods, they have saturated fats. Period. I don't care if it's wild caught salmon, hamburgers, milk, cheese, whatever. If it's from an animal, it has saturated fat. There's only one food that comes from an animal I can think of that doesn't have saturated fat in it to speak of, but it has very, very high cholesterol. Eggs. If you look at the fat of eggs, it's like completely cholesterol. But all the other animal foods I talked about, it's saturated fat and cholesterol. And by the way, do plant foods have cholesterol in them? 0. Plants don't make cholesterol, can have them in. Do plant foods have saturated fats? There's one plant that has the most saturated fat in the world of any food, more than a brick of lard. If I gave you this plant and you ate it, you'd be better off eating a brick of lard if you wanted less saturated fat. And it is a whole plant food. Coconut. Coconut. That's why coconut oil, saturated fat. It's extremely high, saturated fat. How about the other plants that we can eat? The other plants, there are very small amounts of saturated fats in nuts, very small. There's some beans that have like little bits of saturated fats, but the beautiful thing about plants, except for coconut, that the rest of the plant-based world, they have so many different amazing things in them that the amazing things way outweigh. Even if you have a nut with a little bit of saturated fat, they have so many good things in them. And like the beans, like soybeans, have so many good things in them, they have a little saturated fat, that they far outweigh that tiny little bit of saturated fat. Where the saturated fat in the animal foods, you're done. Just like I told you, we have vast piles of evidence that we know that if you lower your LDL below 70, you take a statin agent, if you can't modify your diet, it will be beneficial for you compared to just eating hamburgers and not doing anything. Yeah, but I didn't say not changing your diet. See, that I didn't say. That is far beneficial. We have the data. We have evidence. Anyone hear of the Seventh-day Adventists?
Yeah.
You know why they're famous scientifically and medically? They're a blue zone. They're Loma Linda, California, which is their headquarters. It's the only blue zone in America. What's a blue zone? There are like 7 or 8 areas of the world where the people, there's a great percentage of people who are super centenarians. They not only live well over 100, but they live very well over 100. They're not in nursing homes. They're not in assisted living. They're driving around cars, going on vacation. Did anyone ever see the Blue Zones on Netflix? That's them. So we know from them. They have hundreds of thousands of their people in these studies, and they're vast troves of data. Their founder, her name was it Ellen White? The lady who founded in the 19th century the Seventh-day Adventist movement. She had them eating nuts. And it's been part of their religious customs. Eat nuts, eat nuts. And when we looked at the nuts, yes, it's true. It does prevent heart attacks. It does. Let's see, the nuts. Beans. I said, you can find no other saturated fats in any other vegetables or fruits other than what I just told you. Soybeans, which are extremely healthy for you if you eat them whole, there is a little bit of saturated fat in there. But I can tell you that there's, again, vast, over many years, amounts of scientific data that is all constantly the same. When scientists have gone around the world and looked at just one food, it doesn't matter if you're in Japan, if you're in Finland, if you're in Mexico, if you're in America, if you're in China, if you're in Africa, it doesn't matter where you are in the world. People or populations who eat this one food, the people in the countries who eat the most of this one food, they live the longest. Beans. Beans. It's beans, and I don't care what kind of beans. Soybeans, lentils, black beans, kidney beans, because different people all around they eat different kinds of beans. It's always beans, no matter what kind of beans, and it's the same thing with nuts. That concludes my dive into the saturated fats. So saturated fats, not good. Trans fats, not good. They elevate your cholesterol. And guess what else elevates your cholesterol? Eating cholesterol. Now, I know you're going to read things that say, we don't know if you eat cholesterol that it would elevate your cholesterol. It does. It does. Remember what I told you in the beginning? Your liver makes just enough cholesterol that you need. It's not stupid. It knows how much cholesterol you need to make your cell membranes and your estrogen and testosterone. Why would it have a deficiency? You don't have to eat things that have cholesterol in it to raise your cholesterol. And that's what happens. Once you start eating too much cholesterol, and where is cholesterol? In all animal foods. Animals make cholesterol to make their hormones and cell. So if you take in other animals' cholesterol into you, your body cannot really lower its cholesterol manufacture down, and yours will start to go up. So what I'm trying to tell you is the secret to not taking that statin is don't eat these things I just told you. That's it. Dr. Weiss, there's not enough to eat, right? I'm going to die. I don't know. I look pretty okay. So what would you eat?
Green stuff.
Plants. Just plants.
Colorful plants.
Look at this beautiful store. The reason why I love to come here is because Greens carries these things that are not only, they have a great produce department, but they don't have a serving of poison on it. If you're careful about your diet and you want to become healthy, why would you choose healthy food and then have it sprayed with pesticides. It doesn't make any sense, right? Has anyone been paying attention to the news in the past, like 3 or 4 weeks ago, that the EPA banned Dacthal? Did you read that in the? That's been used since like the 1970s. It's the main herbicide sprayed on broccoli. If you don't eat organic broccoli, you were eating Dacthal. It's so dangerous, they outlawed it after like 40 years. Just come to greens. And it doesn't mean that all the other pesticides are safe. It's just that they haven't gotten around to them. There's no pesticide I know of that's safe. It's just that they know that one definitely causes cancer. The other ones they use are suspected of causing cancer. Like, does anyone know? The #1 pesticide is Roundup. You will never find Roundup in anywhere in this store. I mean, I haven't gone through every jar, but by law, they're not, it says organic, this is an organic store, they're not allowed to have it in here. The World Health Organization has listed glyphosate as a probable carcinogen. You're aware of this guy this custodian, like about 5 years ago, who had this big case against Monsanto in California? He was using Roundup on the school grounds for years, and he would spray it as a weed killer, and he got this terrible lymphoma. And the jury awarded him like $200 million because the evidence is that it causes cancer. Consumer Reports, okay, which I trust. They've been around for more than I'm alive. And other reputable agencies looked at our bread supply. What does Roundup have to do with bread? Well, you know what? Oats, all grains, oatmeal, bread, anything you have wheat in, beans. You know what they found? If you are not eating organic bread or organic oatmeal, whatever, you have Roundup levels higher than the EPA allows. If it doesn't have organic on it, it's contaminated. Look up the Consumer Reports. When you go Google Consumer Reports Roundup or glyphosate levels in wheat, because it's just very contaminated. I know this doesn't specifically have anything to do with cholesterol, but you got me going with if you want to try and eat healthy, go, do it 100%. So another comment I wanted to make on why I don't like to give people statin agents. And it's not that I would never. If I must, I will, but I try like hell not to give it to them. And it's because, number one, I know it like I know my name, that if people really adopt a really healthy diet, you will have the lowest cholesterol of your life. And why would you want to get diabetes anyway from taking a statin agent? Number two, when doctors give a patient a prescription for a statin agent, you know what it is? A permission slip to not stop eating ice cream, to not stop eating saturated fats, to not stop eating hot dogs, to not stop eating hamburgers and shellfish and whatever. Because what happens is, psychologically, we get this, and you say to yourself, well, I can keep eating what I'm eating now because now the drug is a permission slip for me to just keep eating. And what generally happens is foods that have a lot of fat in them are pleasure traps and they're addictive. And we like to eat as much as we can of it. And so we will eat as much as we can of it. And then your cholesterol is going to keep going up. And then you're going to have to go in 3 years and you're going to have to get more statin agents. And here's the other reason. Remember what I told you about saturated fats, that they can cause diabetes, and that we have evidence that they may cause cancer cells to metastasize? Does Lipitor stop that? No. So you may think that you're getting healthier or you're preventing heart attacks taking Lipitor or Crestor or Zocor, And you are, technically, but you are increasing your chance of getting diabetes and metastatic cancer because it's a permission slip to keep eating these other foods and more of them. And that's more saturated fats that cause more diabetes and metastatic cancer. And when I went to medical school in Newark, on the first day, the first lesson is the professor comes in class and they write on the board, primum non nocere. That is an ancient Latin saying that they always teach all first-year medical students. And it means, first, do no harm. Then you can go and help somebody. And I don't want to harm someone first if I know that there's something better. So, like I said, I will try. We will work with the patient, and we work very hard. We meet people where they are, right? We understand, but we help you to get there in many kinds of ways, because eating a diet of whole plant foods will keep you off a statin drug. It will not only prevent diabetes, it will get rid of your diabetes if you have it. It's the cure. And as we found out from my father, even on near death, it can kill cancer cells once you take the saturated fat out. That's my spiel. Yes. No. This young lady asks, what would you tell an athlete who has an intolerance to eating beans? Is that what you're saying? Is that all kinds of beans? All kinds of legumes? Or just certain kinds? Okay. How many people here have like an intolerance or don't feel so good eating beans or legumes?
Not a fan.
Gassiness, bloating? No? One, two. Taste. Taste can be overcome. That's not a problem. Taste is it's an accommodation thing. I'm surprised. No? You haven't heard this? That's why they made Beano. This supplement that you take. Beans, like I told you, I don't want people not to eat beans. I try like hell to have people eat beans because what did I tell you? We know that it is a plank of longevity. If you want to live not only a long life, but have a health span across the life, right? You want to eat beans. So I try to fix people's bean problems as much as I can. There are different people who have different kinds of bean problems or bean intolerances. I would say the number one complaint is that they cause flatulence. They cause you to fart indelicately. This is true. Is there anything we can do about that? Yes, and that's why Eden brand beans, which you will find on this shelf here in this beautiful store, it says it's made with kombu, right? Kombu is a seaweed. They put that in there to help you. You could eat Eden brand beans. Bay leaves, I haven't tried that one, but I'll take your word for it. I'm going to make that suggestion next time. What else could help you? And why is this gas occurring? It's because beans have they have this carbohydrate. And did you know carbs are good? They're good. When people say they go on a low carb diet, I think what they mean to say is they're going on a low junk food diet. Or that's what they should go on. But unfortunately, I think they cut out whole carbohydrates. That's all plants. Plants are carbohydrates. Meat and animal products have zero carbohydrates. So when people say low carb diet, I'm guessing they're just eating a meat or an animal food diet, and that definitely is not good. It's not good to eat a processed carbohydrate diet. Beans, which are amazing, amazing medicines, have a carbohydrate in it. It's very hard to break down until it gets to your colon. Does anyone know what the gut microbiome is? It's trillions of bacteria in your colon. And guess what they love? They love to break this down into gas, and then you start liberating it. And it's a normal process. You know what you can do to eliminate some of the load of this hard to break down carbohydrate? You can sprout the beans. Do you know what culture is experts at sprouting beans and legumes and lentils? Indian culture. This is a plank of their culture. And if you don't know how to do this, it can get a significant amount of this starting carbohydrate out and lower the gases for you. But it's a process that takes days. It's not just soaking them overnight. You have to soak them in a container, then you empty them in, then you transfer it in another container. It takes like, I don't know, 3-4 days until they start to sprout. Does anyone know a specific product in this store that contains sprout, which is very healthy for you, that contains these sprouted legumes? I'll give you a hint. And there may be more, but I don't know every product in the store. It's bread, which does not have, yes, Ezekiel bread.
Right.
It's all sprouted. If you look at it, it's sprouted legumes. So eating stuff like that will help you.
What about fermenting the beans? Like the Japanese have a lot of fermented beans.
You mean like natto?
Yeah.
Natto, but I can't give you an exact answer. Maybe in between. The last thing I wanted to say with this young lady asking about the protein, why are you asking about the protein? Because guess what the protein stars are of the plant world? Legumes. They have more protein per ounce. If you're looking for protein, people are always saying, Dr. Weiss, where are you going to get your protein from? I can't only eat plants. I need meat. I need chicken. It's high protein. That's true that those are very high protein, but plants, if you were to eat a whole plant diet, you would have exactly enough protein. And as it turns out, when you measure the average American eating, they have way too much protein. And then that protein increases your chance of getting cancer, it increases your chance of getting chronic kidney disease, and all kinds of bad things. So eating plants has just the right amount of protein, and beans should be a part of it. This young lady asked, is there an association between eating beans and getting kidney stones? You know what the number one food that causes kidney stones is? Animal foods. Meat, chicken, animal foods. We know, it's been known for years, that if you are prone to kidney stones, eating a plant-based diet decreases it. However, there is a certain plant, I didn't get to the beans yet, there's a certain plant which is crazy, concentrated in calcium oxalate. Does anyone know what plant this is that is in this store? Spinach. It's like up here. The next, number 2 is like down here. So if you have kidney stones or are prone to them, spinach is very healthy for you to eat. But if you're one of these people who have high oxalate levels or you're prone to kidney stones, I just would stay away from spinach. There are many other greens you can eat. What's number 2 on the list? Yeah, Swiss chard.
Kale.
No. Beet greens. Wow. Like rhubarb. Sorrel. I've never seen sorrel in here. It's hard to get. We call it, when I was growing up, sour grass. Or Eastern Europeans used to make a soup out of it called chav.
Yeah.
And it comes out only in the spring. But that's very high, sorrel. Guess what's number 3? Beans. Not every bean, but there's certain beans that have, it's not crazy amounts of oxalate, but it's some oxalates. But when I tell my patients who are worried about eating too much oxalates for kidney stones, I tell them this: don't eat spinach. And who needs rhubarb or chard? There's so many greens. Just pick something else. But you know what you should spend your bucks on, your oxalate bucks? Spending them on beans, because beans make you live a long time. That's what you should do. Yeah, I never restrict people from beans because of kidney stone problems. Although I would say as a class of foods, other than the ones I told you, as a group, they do have some moderate amounts of oxalates in it, but they shouldn't be a problem for most people. Yes, ma'am.
Is there a certain amount of protein that you should take in there?
That is an excellent question. There is. Is there a certain amount of protein we should take in daily? Does anyone know the answer to that question? What does the federal government recommend we do? For the average person, you know, you're not a weightlifter or marathoner, you're not an endurance athlete. The average person who's an office worker, how many grams of protein should an average woman and an average man take in?
60 grams.
45 for the average woman and 55 for the average man. You're very close. How much does the average American man take in?
Probably about 80.
125. The average American woman, I don't know, 110. Double? Double? More than double? Do you know why we have all these problems? That's why. That's why. Because for eating like that, you can't eat all that stuff. It causes problems. That's the baseline. But how about as you're getting older? Do you know there's something which is called sarcopenia? Do you know what that means? There's something called osteopenia. What does penia mean? It means poorness in Latin. You're poor. Penia means lessening or you're going down. Osteo is bones. Your bones are demineralizing. They're getting thinner. Sarco is muscle. Your muscles are getting poorer. They're shrinking away. And because we're getting older and your sex hormones, which help to drive these things and build mass, muscle mass, bone mass, they're going down too. And most people get more sedentary as they get older. These three things help to keep up muscle mass, keep up bone mass. That's why we get poorness in this area. And now we know that actually, if you don't want to shrink away to nothing, and you don't want to fall and break your hip, and you don't want to, be so weak you can't get up the stairs or whatever, you need to have more protein as you're getting older. And it's based on weight per se. When I say 45 or 55, I'm giving you for the average sized person. I would say for the average sized woman, it's got to be 60 grams once they are menopausal. 60 grams. We've had women who come to us with osteoporosis, and they can take drugs, which cause problems, and the drugs, sometimes they work, but the medical studies have shown that they do not prevent death, and most fractures of osteoporosis are not helped by these drugs. And when they get off the drugs, and if they do have at least 60 grams of protein, and we train people to, how do they know you're eating? Because you have it up here, 60 grams of protein, certain loading exercises to build your muscles, because remember, you don't want your muscles to go away into nothing, because your muscles anchor into the bones. If you don't have anything pulling on the bones are going to go away. You need muscles to build the bones. So if you put all this together and make sure your vitamin D is okay, because vitamin D is important for muscle and bones. So vitamin D, the 60 grams of protein if you're a woman, and the loading exercises, we get the average person to reverse their bone density. They grow bone, right? So for someone like you, 60 grams. So what are you saying? If we're eating too much protein, why do we have so much osteoporosis? Is that what you're saying? Sedentary life. Sedentary life. It's not because you have too much protein. The protein for bone and muscle mass, it's the only good thing you have going for you if you're eating too much protein. But the problem is the major factor in losing your muscles and bone mass is sedentary living. I'm going to get to you next. Yes, ma'am.
Is there a better way to do like the organic dry beans where I soak them overnight and cook them, or canned organic beans? Is one better than the other?
You know, the canned beans are very convenient.
They're also a lot
They're very expensive. I mean, dried beans are a fraction of the cost, and you know why? Because it takes a lot of work. I mean, it's not work like your cooking work. It takes time. It takes time, right?
Are they healthier? Or
No,
no?
they're the same. They end up to be the same, but they're charging you for time. I cooked them the other night. I usually, and I figured, you know what? I don't want to spend 2 hours boiling them. Maybe if I soak them for 24 hours, it'll only be an hour. Nope. I soaked them for 24 hours, it still took me 2 hours.
I soaked mine overnight, and today they cooked in like a half an hour.
I don't know, maybe you have magic chickpeas. I don't know. I just made them the other night. I don't know why it took me. Maybe my oven or stove is, I don't know. But I was surprised at how long it took me.
Right.
Instapot. See, the Instapot, yeah, it's the answer to your dreams. Right? Just get an Instapot. Yes, ma'am. That is such an excellent question. What part does genetics play in osteoporosis? Well, let me ask you this. What part does genetics play in breast cancer? What role does genetics play in getting heart attacks? What role does genetics play in getting diabetes and high blood pressure? Is it significant? Raise your hand if you think yes. In all of these things. No one's going to raise their hand? You know what they taught me in medical school, thanks to your tax dollars? That all of these there's significant genetic risk. They still teach it in medical school today. If you go there, in Harvard Medical School, New Jersey Medical School, when a doctor, if you go into a doctor's office and you're having like chest pain or whatever, the doctor will start interviewing to see why you have the chest pain. The number one question he's going to ask you, what'd your father die of? What'd your mother die of? Did they have chest pain? Did they have heart attack? Because it's taught. If you have rheumatoid arthritis, number one question, hey, anyone in your family have rheumatoid arthritis? Hey, multiple sclerosis. Anyone have multiple sclerosis? Because it's taught in medical school for almost most diseases, there's a strong genetic predisposition. Does anyone know who Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn is? If you are interested in these topics, I would encourage you to read his book, Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. There should never be another stent placed in this country unless you're actively having a heart attack. Cardiac stents are a crime. Coronary bypasses should never be performed anymore. I don't care how clogged up your arteries are, because they've been proven, except in one case, if you're on a critical list and you're going to die tomorrow, you shouldn't have any of this stuff done. It's been shown not to help you. We waste hundreds of billions of dollars. In Morristown Medical Center, this heart, hundreds of millions of dollars. It's all for naught. It doesn't mean anything. And you will learn why when you read Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease by Caldwell Esselstyn. Here's something else you'll learn when you read that book. You know what you'll learn? My favorite saying by Dr. Esselstyn, which applies to you, your question. Your genes are the bullets loaded into the gun, and what pulls the trigger is the food you eat. Look, who amongst us has perfect genes? I don't. And my family, everyone dies of cancer, but no one ever had a heart attack. Someone else's family, they don't have heart attacks. Sudden death when you're 50 years old, or you had a bypass operation when you were 45, or someone's uncle died, early cardiac death. Another family, it's breast cancer, or someone else, it's diabetes or high blood pressure. But the great equalizer is food. When I was in medical school, I remember specifically sitting in the classroom when they told me, there are certain people who get osteoporosis. I am Jewish. They said Jewish women get osteoporosis. They said Jewish Jewish, like thin-boned or smaller-boned women are more predisposed to get osteoporosis. And they said African Americans, or people with African American heritage, are less likely to get osteoporosis. Is there some grain of truth to somewhere in there? Maybe, but nobody has to get osteoporosis. If you eat 60 grams of protein, if your vitamin D level is okay, and if you do the resistance work, it doesn't, I don't care what your genes are, it doesn't matter. And it's the same thing with the heart attacks. Heart attacks is the #1 cause of death past 50 in this country. And did you know that for a male who's past 50, 25% of all cardiac problems are sudden death. You don't even have a chance to get to a doctor, you just drop dead all of a sudden. So it's very common. It can be 0. Read Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. And you'll learn a lot about cholesterol in there too.
How many milligrams of vitamin D do you need?
After looking at years and years in data, the average person should take 2,000 units of vitamin D every day because of the following consideration. During the COVID pandemic, guess what we found out who the people were most likely to die in the intensive care unit on ventilators? The people with the lowest vitamin D levels. Here's something else we found out, that as you get older, the people with the lower vitamin D levels, they're more likely to fall. I didn't say break your bones, I said fall. And falling is not good when you get older. Here's another thing we found out. Pre-diabetics who are low in vitamin D, when you give them vitamin D, they become non-diabetics. That's interesting. Take 2,000 units of vitamin D every day. Or someone else had another question.
What are your thoughts on pasture and grass-fed dairy eggs? Now, I know what you said about, all meats, but do you have a view on like grass-fed milk, creamers?
The young lady asked, what is my opinion on grass-fed and conscientiously raised and naturally raised without hormones and pesticides and antibiotics? Because there's those things that have to meet standards to be given to you, right? Unfortunately, the raised, the conscientiously raised animal foods have no less saturated fat, trans fats than regular, CAFO or warehouse food. So based on just the information I gave you regarding saturated fats, because this was a cholesterol lister, you don't want to eat saturated fats because you don't want to get clogged up arteries, diabetes, and cancer, and Alzheimer's disease.
Well, I don't eat meat now, but I was thinking of like maybe I do eat like the occasional eggs, but I only eat pasture
Right.
raised
Well,
eggs from chickens.
now I think the question is, Dr. Weiss, I get what you're saying. And by the way, that information that I spent 20 minutes giving you, it's just the tip of the iceberg of why animal foods are not so good if you don't want to get cancer. I could go on for 3 more hours giving you stuff. Let me just give you a taste. Do you remember about maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago, the FDA recalled like a blood pressure drug, Diovan. All of a sudden, they took it off the market because it was contaminated. And also Zantac, like those stomach medicines, you read it in the news. All of a sudden, it went off the shelf. You couldn't find it in CVS. It was contaminated with an industrial contaminant. It's a contaminant which is it causes cancer. And it's not supposed to be in these medicines. It's a byproduct of industrial manufacture in these cases. But the FDA has a very strict limit. They don't allow you to have more than, let's say, 100 milligrams of this stuff per day. The FDA is always testing everything, and they found this. They said, shut this down, off the shelf. until they cleaned out the factories. It was gone for like almost a year. People couldn't get these medications. Did you know that when you cook a chicken breast and you eat it, it has way more of this molecule than the Zantac? The government never says anything about that. Why are they so crazy about taking Zantac and blood pressure medicines? Just like one meal of chicken per week. And if you want to read about this, I'll give you the reference, NDMA. NDMA. Go to nutritionfacts.org, and in the search box, put an N as in Nancy, D as in David, M as in Mary, and A as in Alan. NDMA. Nutritionfacts.org. Is there some amount that I could eat and still be safe of even conscientious grass that doesn't have whatever? And just to let you know, do you know they've tested organic meat and organic? The pesticide, microplastics, what's the one we have now? Alkyl phenols, the PFAS, the perfluorinated alkyl chemicals that are coating New Jersey, they're the same level in organic. They're not any less. So raising organic doesn't make a difference. Organic plants, yes, it does. Like wheat and whatever, it doesn't have it. But the organic animals, they still have the same level of contaminants. Does anyone know who Colin Campbell is? If you read his China study, he's nutritional biochemistry professor emeritus at Cornell University, and he's done the calculations. The calculations are this. If you eat no more than 5%, you could eat up to 5% of your calories per week of animal foods and still be okay. So what does that amount to? That amounts, let's see, there are 21 meals in a week, right? You eat 3 times a day, 7 days a week. If you ate one meal of like you had a chicken dinner, you would still have okay outcomes
So
for
my
one meal.
grass-fed coffee creamer is still okay. Since I'm not eating meat.
No, animal proteins. When he was saying it, his calculation was in instigating cancer growth. If you could stay below 5%, and I don't know, you'd have to add up, if you're not eating anything else but coffee creamer, you'd have to add up what percent of how many calories is that total and how many calories you're eating. As long as you say 5%, he's like the world's expert. Yes, but here's what I've noticed. It's almost impossible to do. Statistically, if you could do it, you could, but I've never met anyone who could do it. And the problem is it's impossible to draw the line on that, because human beings, it's very hard for us to contain ourselves. Once we eat something, it turns into a slippery slope, and it's better just to be good all the time. It's like if you're a cigarette smoker, you say, I'm just going to have 1 cigarette a day. It's hard to maintain. I can tell you that in case you're interested and you want to find out more information about yourself, we have an amazing opportunity. And I don't mean to blow our own horn, but I really do think it's unique, an evaluation in the world. And this is what it is. It's called a new patient package. And it gives you the opportunity to look inside yourself where nobody has ever, sounds like Star Trek, where men as humans have never gone before, to look inside yourself to get a whole range of blood tests and evaluations you never knew existed. You didn't know about it. You didn't know where these things were, what about yourself, and look into the future. These are predictive tests to see, what is my chance of getting cancer? What is my chance of getting a heart attack and stroke? How much inflammation do I have? Am I insulin resistant? Could I get diabetes? The nice thing about that is if we find dangers lurking, it's not a doomsday clock. We'll tell you what to do to not get it. And you leave this package, which exists It's 5 visits. The first one with me where we go over your entire life since you were born. It's an hour. The second one where you meet, where we give you a prescription to go to LabCorp and you get tests which you've never seen before at LabCorp, which are these predictive tests. We give you all this homework and stuff to learn about, like this thing I gave you with Dr. Greger with the NDMA, right? NDMA. Then you meet with our lifestyle director, Asha. And Asha, whatever problems you want to know, Asha, I can't do this. How am I supposed to cook this? How am I supposed to sprout this? I don't know how to cook. Where do I get these recipes? Where should I shop? She has every single answer you could ever. I'm stressed out. How do I sleep? I can't sleep. She coaches you and brings you along to make you a master. Then you come back after all these tests. Some of them have to go to the Cleveland Clinic where Dr. Esselstyn is to be run. It takes 3 weeks. They come back, you sit down with me, visit number 3, 2 with me. You come back with me and we go over every single facet. You will understand every single thing that you got and you will know what your prospects are for the future, the good and the bad, how to make the good greater and the bad eliminate it. I said eliminate it. Then you meet with Asha again and she develops the roadmap. Okay? And in between, you get evaluated on your movements. Because remember what I said, as we get older, we need to pay attention to our frame, right? Because if we don't, someone will end up taking care of us, and we won't be able to take care of us. I saw that with my mother and my patients. I don't want that. I want to take care of myself. And this is a look in the future in the same way to make sure that you won't end up like this 40 years from now or 30 years from now. So all that stuff, you'll get a roadmap and we'll discharge you, say, there you go. Now you can have a good life. And then if you like us, you may want to stick around. If you've had enough and you want to do it on your own, now you know what to do.